Okay, so this next lesson is for lesson 12, and I believe I'm going to put lesson 12 and lesson 13 together. Both lessons are about two individuals that are really important to show progress in the Renaissance era. So if you were to have a question about progress, you would probably mention these people. So we're thinking about the factor of role of individuals here, and we're looking at two people. The first one being Andreas Vesalius, and then for lesson 13, we're going to look at William Harvey. Now, these lessons are very, very straightforward, so it's more so going to be me just explaining to you the sort of instructions about this. So for this first one, what you need to be doing is looking at why was Andreas Vesalius important to the development of medicine. So what did he actually sort of discover? Now, when you think about Vesalius, you need to ultimately be thinking about the idea of anatomy. Now, in the very first lesson, we went over some definitions about what anatomy is. So you can flip over to your very first page to find out the definition for that. But essentially, the idea of anatomy is how the body works, how it sort of runs, literally. So what it looks like, what it connects to, what each part, how it functions. And Andreas Vesalius is really, really important because many reasons. There are three big discoveries that we kind of look at that proves Galen is wrong. And the idea is we start to see here, again, people going against Galen and the traditions of the ancient world, and really being able to explain with proof, scientific evidence, that there is another theory. So we are going to talk about that in a second. And the second big part, actually we'll go through this first. So over here, first of all, as usual, always remembering your factors of medicine. Over here we have three sort of concepts or theories that Galen had about the anatomy of the body, and you see here that Vesalius proves him wrong. So the speech sort of bubbles are what Galen said. So he said that the rib cage is made out of 7 parts. He said that blood can flow across invisible pores in the septum, so it can just kind of freely move around the heart. And he also said that the jawbone is made of 2 bones, not 1. And the whole idea of this is you just have to look at the images and think, well, and the information that you have, and find out, well, what is actually the truth? What is the anatomy like? And these are things that we take today, and we still believe it's scientifically proven. So Vesalius is very important for proving certain parts of the anatomy is made in a certain way. So just focusing on these alone, we have that the ribcage is actually made of 3 parts. This over here, this is to symbolise a septum. So a septum is a solid wall of tissue that essentially is between the heart. And that's there in the heart, so it's not as if the blood can kind of move freely. And then it isn't 2 bones, as you can see over here. The jawbone is actually 1 bone. So he is able to kind of look at these things, and the whole idea of that is he's able to, the reason why Vesalius is sort of able to make these discoveries is because he kind of looks into dissection, and the kind of key part over here is, and you'll see it over here, is there's this big change from the Middle Ages to the Renaissance period in which people are able to look at dissection, because if you remember, in the Middle Ages, dissection wasn't really allowed. The church didn't really approve. Now in the Renaissance era, after the Protestant Reformation, after you see this decline of the church, what we start to see here is students crowding around the body so that they can see what Vesalius is doing. And Vesalius carrying out the dissections himself. So the idea is he's able to challenge those old ideas because he's able to open up the body and actually figure out what the anatomy was like, and people were watching him. So he's key in this sort of movement of dissection being used to reject old traditional ideas and prove Galen wrong. Now, he went one step further, so not only is he important as an individual, he went one step further and actually spread his ideas quite well. And he did this through the communication idea of books. And there's a very important book in which he wrote, and it's called The Fabric of the Human Body. You can read about it over here. And The Fabric of the Human Body, essentially what it was drawings of muscle men at different stages of dissections. Now, if you think back to one of our earlier Renaissance lessons, you'll be able to think about how, well, if you have a drawing of an accurate depiction of the body, then your knowledge about the body is going to increase. Because all this time you have to imagine yourself, if you were a student doctor, your whole concept of the body is based on Galen's ideas and his theories, whereas now you have Vesalius's book, The Fabric of the Human Body, which really shows you how the body is, and they're accurate drawings. So remember this idea of representative pictures helping medicine, which you would have done in 2 lessons before this. So what you have to do after you fill that in, you just have to read each one and think which factor does that apply to a little bit more. So which one you think it would make most sense. I'll just keep to this box because I kind of already mentioned it already. But over here it says thousands of copies of Vesalius' books called The Fabric of the Human Body were printed and sent all over Europe quickly, spreading his new ideas. There was soon no shortage of Vesalius books in universities. He chose the best printer and supervised the engraving of the illustrations and the printing himself. Printing meant that as no copying by hand had to be done, no mistakes were made. So if we had to think, well, what factor does that show? Remember, factor of medicine is something that either that changes medicine or causes it to stay the same. So I did mention it before, but I would say this one could be communication. It's improved communication. What you then have to do is then this step sort of activity. I can't remember if we've already come across this in the book already, but this is a task that happens throughout these booklets, in which you need to think about, well, what were the steps to his improvement, to his kind of contribution to the development of medicine? And then in this box, the however box, you have to write down what were the limiting factors over here? Why was that not complete progress? And the whole point of this is to help you find out some key information and understand the story, so that if you were to do a judgment question, you've got your 2 sides. You know why this individual was important to development, but you also know why they kind of could have been limiting, depending on what side you would be arguing. So an example of this might be Vesalius. In box 1 I might write Vesalius used dissection to improve his understanding of the anatomy and had students watching him. The second box might be Vesalius used a printer to put his findings of the anatomy into his book called The Fabric of the Human Body. And number 3 might be people use the illustrations in The Fabric of the Human Body to increase their understanding of the body, therefore helping in surgery or treatment, something like that. Now over here we just have some extra knowledge, and then you have your summary box, where I would like you to just write down why, particularly pick out a few reasons why Vesalius is so important to the Renaissance era.